The phone buzzed on the counter, pulling me away from my coffee. I wasn't expecting a call, but seeing my sister's name on the screen made me hesitate. Calls from Sarah were never casual. They always came with strings attached. Reluctantly, I answered. "Oh, you didn't know about the Bahamas trip?" Sarah's voice dripped with faux sympathy, the kind that instantly put me on edge. "I thought Mom told you. We're all going next month. Mom, Dad, me, and Jason. It's gonna be amazing. But someone needs to watch the pets while we're gone. Mom said she'd ask you." I froze, gripping my coffee mug until I thought it might shatter. My name is Mia, and at 29 years old, I had just learned that my family had planned an entire vacation without me. Worse, they had only looped me in because they needed someone to watch their dogs, Rocky and Max. "No, Sarah," I replied, my voice tight with the effort to stay calm. "Mom hasn't mentioned anything, not about the Bahamas, not about pet sitting." "Well, you know how she is," Sarah laughed, brushing it off as if it were nothing. "She probably forgot, but you're not busy anyway, right? You can watch Rocky and Max for the week. Mom's been counting on you since you're the only one not going." The words hit harder than I expected. The only one not going, of course. It wasn't just that I hadn't been invited. It was that they'd never even considered including me. The realization brought a rush of memories, each one a brick in the wall of resentment I hadn't realized I'd been building. I thought about family dinners where conversation would suddenly quiet as I entered the room. Or the odd probing questions Mom had been asking about my work schedule lately. My dad's awkward attempts at small talk about whether I had plans for the weekend. All those moments now made perfect sense. They were planning this trip right in front of me, just making sure I'd be available to take care of their pets. That evening, Mom finally called. "Honey, I've been meaning to talk to you," she started, her tone overly bright. "We need a favor." I didn't let her finish. "Let me guess. You need me to watch the dogs while you're all in the Bahamas." "Oh, so Sarah told you." Her laugh was a little too forced. "Yes, it would be such a help. You know how Rocky gets anxious at the kennel, and Max needs his medication twice daily. We'll only be gone 8 days." She rambled on, filling the silence with details about flights, resorts, and snorkeling excursions as if that would soften the blow. Not once did she acknowledge the glaring omission that they'd excluded me from the vacation entirely. "No, we wish you could come." "No, maybe next time." Just instructions on how to care for their pets, as if that would make up for it. "So, you'll do it?" she asked brightly, as though the answer were obvious. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice flat as I stared at my laptop screen, already scrolling through travel websites. Somewhere in the pit of my stomach, a small ember of rebellion flickered to life. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring blankly at the search results on my laptop. Greece, Italy, even the Pacific Northwest. I'd been saving vacation days for a while, dreaming of taking time off for myself. But somehow, every year, something came up. Family plans, work obligations, or just plain guilt about leaving when there were more important things to do. My family had always operated this way. My sister Sarah, younger by 2 years, had been the golden child for as long as I could remember. It wasn't just favoritism, it was blatant. When she got into college, they threw her a massive party with banners, catered food, and dozens of their friends. My acceptance into a competitive journalism program a year earlier, it earned a polite, "That's nice, Mia," before they changed the subject. Even when Sarah dropped out halfway through her second year to find herself in Europe, they never batted an eye. Monthly checks funded her travels, while she posted filtered pictures of quaint cafes and scenic beaches. Meanwhile, I worked 2 jobs through college, graduated with honors, and built a stable career. But to them, I was just Mia, the reliable one, the responsible one. The family backup plan. As I scrolled through flights and accommodation options, the memories played like a highlight reel in my mind. Sarah's semester abroad meant canceling my graduation party. Her self-discovery trip in Prague took priority over our mom showing up to my first gallery showcase. Every time I had something meaningful to celebrate, They had a reason to miss it. My phone buzzed. It was Sarah again. "Mom said you're being weird about the dogs," her text read. "Come on, Mia. Don't be difficult. You never take time off anyway. What would you even do with a vacation? Sit at home? You're great with Rocky and Max. This is perfect for you." Her condescending tone, even in text, made my blood boil. It wasn't enough that they'd left me out. Now they were painting me as unreasonable for being upset about it. They didn't know about the blog I'd been running for 2 years, a side project where I combined my love of writing and photography to document small trips I'd taken on weekends. It had grown steadily, gaining followers who appreciated my recommendations for hidden gems and offbeat adventures. To my family, though, it was just a little hobby. The next call came from Dad. "Mia, princess, your mom's upset. You know how much she worries about the dogs. Rocky barely ate last time he went to the kennel, and Max needs his meds. You've always been so good with animals." "Did it ever occur to any of you to invite me on the trip?" I asked, cutting him off. There was a long pause. "Well," he started, his voice faltering, "Sarah mentioned you probably couldn't take the time off work, and you know how your mother likes to plan things. Plus, Jason already put down the deposit for our rooms." "Right," I said, my voice flat. "Just like she planned my graduation party. Oh wait, she didn't, because Sarah's semester abroad came up and everyone had to fly to Paris instead." "That's not fair, Mia," Dad said, his tone defensive now. "Your sister needed our support." She was finding herself. "And I was supposed to find myself where? At the office?" I snapped. The silence that followed was deafening. I hung up before he could respond and turned back to my laptop. One destination stood out, a place I'd been dreaming of since a college photography class introduced me to its whitewashed buildings and endless blue skies. Santorini. The travel dates lined up perfectly with my family's Bahamas trip, and by some miracle, there was a sale on flights. My cursor hovered over the Book Now button. For once, I didn't hesitate. I clicked. The morning after, I woke up to a flood of messages. Mom's text tone had shifted from cheerful to sharp. "Mia, I don't understand why you're being so difficult. It's just a week. Sarah and Jason are looking forward to snorkeling. Don't ruin it for them." Sarah, unsurprisingly, had gone for condescension again. "Why are you acting like this? It's just dog sitting. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Honestly, it's a bit immature." Even Dad, who usually stayed out of these arguments, chimed in with a long-winded email about family loyalty and helping out when needed. By the time our weekly family dinner rolled around, I was ready. I sat at the table listening to them gush about the resort Sarah had picked out. Crystal clear waters, 5-star dining, guided tours. They spoke as if I weren't even there, like I didn't exist outside of being their backup plan. When there was a lull in the conversation, I cleared my throat. "I've made other arrangements for those dates," I said calmly. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. "What do you mean, other arrangements?" "You'll need to find someone else to watch Rocky and Max. I'm going to Greece." The room fell silent. "You're not going to Greece," Sarah scoffed, the laugh bubbling out of her before she could stop it. I pulled up my confirmation email and slid my phone across the table. "Actually, I am 8 days in Santorini, starting the same day you leave for the Bahamas." "But you can't," Mom sputtered. "What about the dogs? The kennel is fully booked." "That sounds like poor planning on your part," I said, folding my napkin neatly. "Maybe Jason can watch them since he's apparently family enough to go to the Bahamas." "He's allergic to dogs," Sarah protested. "How convenient." Mom's jaw tightened as I stood up, ready to leave. "Mia, sit down. This isn't like you. You've always been the responsible one," she said, her voice teetering between anger and desperation. "That's the problem, Mom. You all decided who I was supposed to be. Dependable Mia. Always available Mia. Never has her own life Mia. Did it ever occur to you that I might want to be included in family vacations? That I might have my own plans, my own life?" The weight of my words seemed to settle over the table. For a moment, no one spoke. My dad looked at his plate, avoiding eye contact. Sarah stared at me, her mouth slightly open. as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. And my mom? She looked like I'd just told her I was moving to Mars. I have to go, I said finally, grabbing my bag. I need to shop for swimsuits. Santorini has amazing beaches. The fallout came swiftly, just as I'd expected. By the next morning, Mom had started her guilt campaign in earnest. 6 texts in a row ranged from sweetly passive-aggressive, "Rocky will miss you so much," to outright accusing, "I can't believe you'd do this to your family." Sarah's approach was more direct. She called 3 times, each voicemail more condescending than the last. "Mia, stop being dramatic. This is about dogs, not some big betrayal. You're blowing everything out of proportion." Even Dad, who rarely got involved in family drama, sent me a long-winded email. He used phrases like family duty and pulling together, completely ignoring the larger issue, but I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on preparing for my trip. When the next family dinner rolled around, I arrived armed with patience and a steely resolve. My mom had laid out Rocky and Max's supplies on the dining room table, turning it into some kind of guilt exhibition. There were bags of special food, a laminated schedule for Max's medications, and even Rocky's favorite blanket neatly folded on the side. "Rocky needs this blanket at bedtime or he gets anxious," Mom said, holding it up like it was a sacred artifact. "And Max's medication has to be given exactly 12 hours apart. The kennel just won't understand." "They'll figure it out," I said flatly, scooping a helping of potatoes onto my plate. Dad cleared his throat. "Princess, we could pay you to watch them. Make it worth your while." "My Greece tickets were $3,000, Dad. Non-refundable." The silence was deafening. Sarah, who'd been unusually quiet, suddenly chimed in. "You guys, did you know Mia has a travel blog? She has like 20,000 followers." Mom barely looked up. "That's nice, dear. But about the dogs?" "No, Mom, I'm serious." Sarah pulled out her phone and started scrolling. "Look at these photos she took in Montreal. They're amazing." Mom's fork paused mid-air as Sarah handed her the phone. Dad leaned in to look too. "You went to Montreal?" Mom asked, sounding genuinely surprised. "Yes, Mom. I've been to lots of places. I take short trips whenever I can, and I document them. People actually follow my recommendations for hotels and restaurants." Dad squinted at the screen. "These are professional quality pictures, Mia. Why didn't you tell us about this?" "I did. 3 Thanksgivings ago, actually, but you all changed the subject to Sarah's yoga certification." The weight of that statement hung in the air. My mom put the phone down, her face unreadable. "We haven't been very good at listening to you, have we?" she said quietly. "No," I said simply. "You haven't. But that doesn't change the fact that we need someone to watch the dogs," she added quickly, clinging to the original issue. And just like that, the moment was gone. As my departure date approached, my family cycled through all 5 stages of grief. Mom moved from denial to anger, texting me daily reminders of how much I was letting everyone down. Dad tried bargaining, offering to fund a different trip to Greece at a more convenient time. Sarah oscillated between depression and acceptance, alternating between dramatic complaints, "You're ruining everything," and half-hearted apologies. "Maybe we should have invited you." Then, 2 days before my flight, Mom made one last attempt. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, carrying old photo albums. "You've always been so good with animals," she said, flipping through pictures of me bottle-feeding kittens and walking neighborhood dogs. "Remember when you nursed Sarah's hamster back to health in high school? I also remember missing my best friend's sweet 16 to do it while Sarah was at the beach with her friends," I replied evenly. "That's different. You didn't mind back then." "No, Mom. I did mind. I just wasn't allowed to say so." She snapped the album shut, clearly frustrated. "Well, I hope you're happy. We had to cancel our trip. The kennel's full, and no one else can take the dogs for that long." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and turned it toward her. On the screen was an email thread with Mrs. Patel, a retired neighbor from 2 floors down. "Mrs. Patel is pet sitting," I said. "She's happy to do it for what you'd have paid the kennel." Mom stared at the screen, her jaw tightening. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" "Because for once, I wanted you to feel what it's like not to have me as your backup plan." The morning of my flight, I woke up to a barrage of notifications. Mom had tagged me in a Facebook post, a rare move for her. It was one of my blog photos from Montreal, with a caption so over the top, I had to read it twice. "So proud of my talented daughter Mia and her incredible travel photography. Can't wait to see the stunning pictures from her trip to Greece." I rolled my eyes. Classic mom, spinning the narrative to save face. She wasn't proud, she was protecting her image. A text from Sarah came next. "Mom's telling everyone she helped you plan your trip. She's been bragging at tennis about your blog like it's her idea." I wasn't surprised. For as long as I could remember, appearances had been everything to Mom. Now, having a daughter with a travel blog was something she could flaunt at her country club. What did surprise me was my dad showing up at my apartment, awkwardly holding a small box. "Morning, Princess," he said, stepping inside. "Your sister showed me your blog. I noticed you mentioned wanting this lens for low-light shots, so—" I opened the box and stared at the camera lens inside, the exact one I'd been saving up for. My throat tightened as I looked at him. "Dad, you didn't have to—" "Yes, I did," he interrupted. "Someone needs to support what you're doing. You're really good at this, Mia." For the first time in my life, I saw genuine pride in his eyes. It wasn't about Sarah. It wasn't about the family. It was about me. "Thanks, Dad," I said softly, feeling a warmth I hadn't expected. "Want to see some shots I'm planning to get in Greece?" He stayed for an hour, listening as I explained composition and lighting, even pulling up my blog on his phone to follow it right in front of me. As he was leaving, he hesitated at the door. "I canceled my share of the Bahamas trip," he said. "Told your mom and Sarah to go without me." "Dad, you didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. Someone needs to stay and make sure Mrs. Patel doesn't need backup. Plus, I want to see those Greece photos as you post them. Maybe you can even teach me how to comment on a blog." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. "Thanks, Dad," I managed, my voice softer than I intended. The flight to Santorini was long, but oddly peaceful. As the plane descended, the sight of the island took my breath away. Whitewashed buildings perched on cliffs, the Aegean Sea stretching endlessly below. By the time I checked into my hotel, I felt lighter than I had in years. For once, I wasn't carrying the weight of my family's expectations. Each morning, I woke to spectacular sunrises over blue-domed churches. My days were spent wandering cobblestone streets, photographing hidden alleys, and lounging on pristine beaches. I updated my blog daily, and my followers loved it. The real shock, though, was seeing comments from my family. My dad commented on every single post, his typing improving with each one. From a simple, beautiful sunset on the first day to more thoughtful notes about lighting and composition by the third. Sarah shared my posts on her Instagram, tagging me with captions like, "Look what my amazing sister is doing." It was surreal to see her supporting me, even if it felt a bit performative at first. Mom, on the other hand, couldn't seem to let go. She called daily with updates about the dogs. "Rocky misses you," she'd say, or, "Max won't eat unless your dad hand-feeds him." When the guilt trips didn't work, she switched tactics. "Don't you think you're posting too many sunset pictures? That restaurant review seemed a bit harsh. You don't want to hurt anyone's business." One evening, as I sat at a cliffside cafe, I got an unexpected call from Mrs. Patel. "Your mother's been here 6 times today," she said, clearly amused. "Brings me coffee and asks endless questions about my pet-sitting experience. I think she's having trouble letting go." "I'm so sorry," I said, cringing. "Don't be." After 40 years of teaching high school, 2 dogs are a breeze, but I did tell her that if she's this worried, maybe she should stay home next time. I laughed, feeling a pang of second-hand embarrassment for Mom. Later that night, Dad sent me a private message. "Your mother booked herself into a hotel for the rest of the trip. Says she can't enjoy herself knowing strangers are watching her dogs. Sarah's pretty upset about it." I felt a flicker of guilt, but pushed it aside. For years, my plans, my needs, and my accomplishments had been secondary to whatever the family deemed more important. Mom's decision to ruin her own vacation wasn't my responsibility. Instead of cutting my trip short or apologizing, I doubled down. I wrote about solo female travel, breaking free from expectations, and finding your own path. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments from people sharing similar stories, thanking me for inspiring them. My blog's following doubled, then tripled. A travel magazine reached out, wanting to feature my Greece photos. Even Sarah called, her tone surprisingly sincere. "You know what's funny?" she said. "I always thought I was the brave one, going to Europe to find myself. But you're the one who actually did it, right under our noses. We were too busy with our own drama to notice." Her words stayed with me that night as I stood on my hotel balcony, the glow of Santorini spread out before me. By the time I returned to my hotel after Sarah's unexpected call, the weight of her words lingered. For years I'd been living in the shadow of my family's expectations, but here I was, halfway across the world, finally stepping into my own light. Santorini had been everything I'd hoped for and more. Each day brought new discoveries, hidden paths leading to stunning cliffside views, quiet tavernas where locals shared stories, and vibrant markets filled with colors and life. I documented it all, not just for my blog, but for myself. What I didn't expect was how my family seemed to shift alongside me. Dad's comments on my blog had become more thoughtful. "The way you captured that fisherman's expression in the golden light, it's like I can feel the warmth of the sun." For a man who had always been reserved, his interest felt genuine and new. Sarah's Instagram posts, once curated to the point of being artificial, started to reflect a more personal touch. Trying to see the world through my sister's eyes, she captioned a photo from their trip to the Bahamas. "Not as good as yours, Mia, but I'm learning." Mom, however, was another story. She still called daily, her updates about the dogs slowly morphing into critiques of my blog. "Do you think people will get bored of too many beach pictures? Maybe post something different tomorrow." One evening, I got a call from Mrs. Patel. "Your mother's been here every day," she said with a chuckle. "She's taken over half of Rocky's walks and keeps quizzing me on Max's medication schedule. I think she misses having control." "Sounds about right," I sighed. She even tried to convince me to bring the dogs to her hotel for a visit. I told her no. I laughed despite myself. "Thank you for keeping her in check." Mrs. Patel's voice softened. "Don't worry about her, Mia." I told her that letting go is an important skill. She didn't love that, but I think it made her think. Midway through my trip, I woke up to an email from a well-known travel magazine. They wanted to feature my Santorini photos in their next issue. My hands shook as I read the email again, making sure I hadn't misinterpreted it. It was the kind of validation I'd been chasing without realizing it. But when I posted about the opportunity on my blog, the response from my family was what surprised me most. Dad's comment came first. "Proud of you, princess. Can't wait to buy a copy." Then Sarah shared my post with a caption that made me pause. "My sister's been quietly doing incredible things for years. We just weren't paying attention." Even Mom texted me, her tone uncharacteristically soft. "Your dad showed me the blog post. It's beautiful, Mia. I don't say it enough, but I'm proud of you." It felt strange, like stepping into an alternate reality where my family saw me, not as a backup plan or an afterthought, but as someone worth celebrating. As my trip wound down, I uploaded my final photos from Santorini, a sunset over the caldera, vibrant flowers spilling from whitewashed balconies, and a quiet moment of reflection on a secluded beach. My blog was flooded with comments from readers thanking me for sharing my journey, but the one that stood out came from Dad. "These photos feel like you, Mia. You've always had an eye for beauty, even when the rest of us didn't notice. I'm sorry for that." Tears blurred my vision as I read his words. The next call I got was from Sarah. "Mom converted your old room into a home office," she said. "She's filled it with framed prints of your travel photos. She even had your blog logo made into desk decor. I think she's finally starting to get it." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Don't worry," Sarah added. "I made sure she paid for the prints. Small steps, right? On my last night in Greece, I sat on the balcony of my hotel, the lights of the island twinkling below. My phone buzzed with a message from Mom. It was a picture of her new office, lined with framed versions of my photos. Beneath it was a message I didn't expect. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Mia. Your dad pointed out something I didn't want to hear, that we've been so focused on Sarah's needs and our own plans that we've taken you for granted. I'm not good at saying sorry, but I want to do better. Your photos remind me of how much we've missed. I don't want to miss any more." For the first time in years, I felt a crack in the wall I'd built between us. When I landed back home, a part of me braced for things to snap back to the way they'd always been. But as I walked into my apartment, I found something waiting for me. A large envelope with my name written in Mom's perfect cursive. Inside was a note, written on thick stationery. "Mia, we've missed so much, but I want to start making up for it. Your dad and I are planning Thanksgiving, and I've framed some of your photos for the dining room. Also, we've been talking about a family vacation next year, and we'd love for you to help plan it. I think your blog followers might enjoy seeing where we go next. Love, Mom." Underneath the note was a second envelope with receipts from the framing store and a printout of one of my blog posts with handwritten notes in the margins. Her feedback was still there, but this time, it felt different, more curious than critical. I set the note down and stared out the window. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a step in the right direction. Thanksgiving was the first time I felt like part of the family in years. The dining room walls were covered in framed prints from my travels. My mom had even turned my blog's logo into place cards for the table, a gesture so small but oddly meaningful. "We have an announcement," Mom said during dinner, clearly trying to sound casual. "We're planning another family vacation." I held my breath, expecting the usual bombshell of being excluded. Before I could say anything, Sarah jumped in. "And before you worry, Mia, we want you to help plan it. Your blog's been such a hit. Your followers loved your Greece posts. We thought maybe you could work your magic for our next trip." Dad pulled out a folder. "I've been looking into photography tours in Italy. Thought it'd be fun to learn a thing or two from the expert." "And I already asked Mrs. Patel about the dogs," Mom added quickly. "She agreed months ago. I wanted to make sure everything was covered so you wouldn't feel like we were putting it all on you." I looked around the table, my family watching me expectantly. For the first time, they weren't telling me who I needed to be. They were asking. "Italy sounds perfect," I said with a smile. "But this time, I'm handling the itinerary." Dad grinned. "Wouldn't have it any other way, Princess. After all, you're the expert now." The next few months flew by in a blur of planning and blog updates. My Greece posts continued to gain traction, with readers sharing their own stories of breaking free from family expectations. Sarah started tagging me in her posts more often, showing a side of herself I'd rarely seen. "Mia taught me to look deeper," she wrote on a post from her yoga studio. "Not just at the world around me, but at myself." Even Mom found her own way to connect. She started texting me links to travel articles she thought I'd find interesting, always ending with, "What do you think about this for Italy?" When the time came for the trip, it felt different from the start. On our first day in Florence, Dad pulled me aside, holding his camera awkwardly. "Show me how to get those shots you're always posting," he said, a little sheepishly. Sarah wandered over moments later, her own phone in hand. "Me too," she added. As we stood on a bridge overlooking the Arno River, I guided them through framing and lighting, the sun setting behind us in a wash of gold and pink. For the first time, I didn't feel like the outsider or the backup plan. I felt like Mia, the writer, the photographer, the sister, the daughter, finally seen for who I was. Later that night, as we shared a meal at a small trattoria, Mom raised her glass. "To Mia," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "for showing us a different way to see the world, and each other." The clinking of glasses was the perfect soundtrack to a moment I'd once thought impossible. Stepping onto the flight home, I felt a rare kind of peace. My family wasn't perfect. There were still moments of old habits creeping in, still times when I had to assert my boundaries, but they were trying, and sometimes that's enough. When I posted the final photo from our trip, a candid shot of my family laughing at an outdoor cafe, the caption came to me without effort. Sometimes all it takes is one small step to find your way back to each other. And when you do, the view is worth it. Story 2. After her husband passed away tragically 2 years ago, Amelia Brooks, a 36-year-old bakery entrepreneur in the rainy city of Seattle, had created a straightforward but contented existence. Her existence revolved around her little bakery, where she gave her all to make delicious sweets for the locals. In addition to running her company, she spent her days taking care of her 10-year-old daughter Lila, whose laughter filled their quaint little home on the edge of the woods. Amelia Backslash's life was about to take a drastic turn, despite her best efforts to move on. Caleb, a charming and caring man, entered her life by happenstance and gave her hope for a family and love. However, Caleb was accompanied by his powerful mother, Victoria Grant, whose disapproval concealed darker, more deadly intentions. A critical incident that would permanently alter Amelia's life resulted from what started out as a mild tension, turning into treachery and manipulation. Amelia Brooks had always thought of herself as a strong lady, but she was in pieces after losing her husband 2 years earlier, and she wasn't sure she would ever be able to put herself back together. Her life had been destroyed by Ryan's untimely death in a horrific boating accident. He had been her anchor and her companion in every way. Left alone with Lila, her daughter, who was 8 years old at the time. For the sake of her kid, Amelia struggled with sadness while attempting to keep things somewhat normal. Lila gave her motivation to continue. Even in the face of such a great loss, the tomboyish, adventurous girl possessed the energy of her father and the fiery determination of her mother. Amelia was frequently lifted out of her lowest points by Lila's irrepressible enthusiasm and love of the great outdoors. They would hike the trails close to their cottage or bake cookies in their little but cozy kitchen for hours on end. These instances were little triumphs for Amelia in her fight to rediscover happiness. Located in a peaceful area of Seattle, her bakery turned to become a haven and a lifeline. Locals have grown to enjoy the exquisite pastries made by kneading dough in the mornings. Even though she gave her all at work, the long hours and financial strain were too much to handle. Although it was difficult, she saw operating the bakery alone as a means of maintaining the life she had vowed to provide for Lila. Amelia struggled with loneliness despite her best attempts. It was bittersweet to spend evenings at their old cabin, with the gentle sound of rain pattering against the windows. Although Lila's inquiry and laughter were a comfort, Amelia was still feeling empty since Ryan was not there. She questioned if sadness and survival would continue to define her world, or whether she would ever feel complete again. Then came Caleb, a fortuitous meeting that would gradually upset the delicate balance she had established. His effortless charm and generosity toward Lila and Amelia seemed like a lifeline. However, Amelia's world had been one of quiet perseverance before to Caleb's arrival, replete with strong and loving moments, but also overshadowed by the sadness of losing the guy who had been everything to her. Her relationship with Lila was her lifeline, but as she would soon discover, the difficulties that awaited her would put even that to the test. Amelia Brooks and her daughter Lila made the decision to go to the park on a normal, cloudy afternoon in Seattle. The route was soggy but appealing, and the air was crisp once the rain had stopped for a short while. To help Lila burn off her endless energy, Amelia would frequently take her to the park. Lila enjoyed going full speed on her bike. Amelia took comfort in the steady patter of her daughter's travels, while her laughter reverberated through the treetops. But on this specific day, everything was different. While Lila sped forward on her bike, Amelia sat on a bench and responded to emails on her phone. Calling back to her mother to witness her latest trick, her voice rang out with joy. "I can do it with one hand, see, Mama?" Amelia's pride and terror caused her heart to suddenly race as she looked up. "Watch out, Lila," she said. However, Lila was already cycling more quickly as her self-assurance increased. Then catastrophe hit. Lila's bike wobbled wildly on a spot of slippery mud. The handlebars twisted and she lost her balance, causing her to scream. Amelia dropped her phone in fright and sprang to her feet, her heart sinking. However, A stranger seemed to materialize out of nowhere before she could get to her kid. The man was quick on his feet and caught Lila before she could fall to the ground. He put her back on her feet gently and murmured, "Gotcha," in a steady, quiet voice. A few seconds later, Amelia arrived at them, breathing in frantic breaths. "God, oh God." "Thank you," she said, embracing Lila tightly. "Are you all okay, my love?" Lila nodded, her eyes wide as she gazed up at her savior. "Mom, he saved me." The man grinned broadly. He was in his early 40s, with kind eyes and a tough exterior that complemented his hiking boots and rain-soaked overcoat. He responded in a quiet yet comforting manner. "I'm just glad I was nearby." "By the way, my name is Caleb." Still trembling, she said, "Amelia. And this is Lila, my kid." "Thank you. If you hadn't been here, I'm not sure what would have happened." "It's no trouble," Caleb answered, shrugging his shoulders modestly. "Children are brave, aren't they?" Caleb started to show up in their lives more often after that day. It was coincidental at first. /U 2014, a quick chat while Lila was playing, or an occasional wave in the park. However, those interactions quickly developed into much more. Caleb would visit the bakery for coffee, occasionally staying to talk to Amelia, while Lila excitedly told him about her most recent travels. When Lila found out that he lived in a comfortable old cabin tucked away in the woods, she fell in love with him and gave him the nickname Cabin Caleb. His calm manner contrasted with Amelia's reserved temperament, adding a solid presence to their lives. As time went on, Amelia began to anticipate his visits. Amelia's initial concerns were allayed by Caleb's sincere interest in Lila's stories and his ability to make her laugh. Caleb proposed that they get coffee together one day. Amelia agreed, hesitantly but curiously, that a simple coffee date had evolved into supper. And shortly, late-night discussions that continued into the morning. Caleb wasn't only nice, he was perceptive and always looked for ways to make Lila and Amelia feel valued. We can have spontaneous adventures, movie evenings at his cabin, and zoo outings. For the first time since Ryan's passing, they gradually included Caleb into their life. Something that Amelia believed she had lost forever began to reappear. /in 2014. I hope. The guy who had rescued her daughter was no longer Caleb. He was joining them in their small family, and the prospect of a fresh start accompanied him. Amelia and Caleb's bond grew stronger as the weeks stretched into months in ways neither had foreseen. What started out as friendly park encounters quickly developed into frequent coffee dates and meaningful discussions. Amelia didn't know she needed a safe haven until he entered her life, but Caleb's easy charm and caring demeanor provided it. Their first official date was straightforward, but ideal. After inviting Amelia and Lila to his old cabin in the woods, Caleb prepared a filling dinner and showed them his dog, Max. Lila. Ever the explorer, he soon began exploring the cabin, pointing out items such as Caleb's collection of nature photos and the vintage record player. Amelia and Caleb, meanwhile, sat on the porch drinking tea and discussing everything from his job as an environmental consultant to her bakery. Amelia confessed, "I haven't laughed this much in ages." Her cheeks get warm from Caleb's full attention and laughter. Then, in a light but earnest tone, he said, "I'll have to make sure you laugh more often." Amelia grew even more fond of Caleb because of his innate ability to connect with Lila. He played catch with her in the yard, listened to her stories with great interest, and even assisted her in building a treehouse on one of their weekend excursions. In response, Lila started calling him Cabin Caleb, a moniker she used with unending fondness. One morning following a sleepover at Cabin Caleb's house, she declared that he makes the best pancakes. She had syrup all over her face. Amelia was delighted to see Lila so content and carefree. It had been years since she felt more than just special because of Caleb. He gave them both a sense of belonging. Caleb established himself as a constant in their lives as their relationship developed. He prepared small surprises, such as bringing Amelia pastries from a different bakery to sample, or bringing a bouquet of wildflowers to Lila's school play. On calmer days, they would spend evenings at Amelia's cabin, where Caleb and Amelia would tell stories to each other while Lila dozed off on the couch. These were life-changing moments for Amelia. After years of feeling like she was merely surviving, Caleb made her feel alive again. She found herself rediscovering parts of her identity she thought she'd buried with Ryan. Caleb's patience, kindness, and unwavering support gave her the courage to embrace the possibility of happiness once more. As the seasons changed, so did Amelia's heart. With Caleb by her side, and Lila thriving, she began to see a future that wasn't defined by loss, but by love, resilience, and hope. Caleb wasn't just someone she was falling for. He was the person helping her rebuild her life, one joyful moment at a time. It was a crisp autumn evening when Caleb decided to propose. The sun had set, leaving the sky painted in shades of deep orange and indigo. Amelia, completely unaware of what was about to happen, had been invited to Caleb's vintage cabin for what she thought was a simple family dinner. The soft glow of fairy lights strung across the backyard created a magical atmosphere, while the crackle of a small fire added warmth to the cool evening. Lila, always eager to help Caleb with his surprises, had been bubbling with excitement all day, but managed to keep the secret. She led Amelia outside, claiming Caleb wanted to show her something super cool. As Amelia stepped into the backyard, she paused, her breath catching at the sight. Caleb stood beneath a canopy of twinkling lights, a soft smile on his face. The table behind him was set with her favorite dishes and a bouquet of wildflowers. Her favorite sat in the center. Lila darted ahead, her enthusiasm shining as she took a seat near the fire, barely able to contain her grin. Amelia. Caleb began stepping closer, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for hers. From the moment I met you, you and Lila have brought light and love into my life, in ways I never thought possible. You've shown me what family truly means, and I can't imagine a future without you both. Amelia's eyes filled with tears as Caleb got down on one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate, vintage-inspired ring that perfectly reflected her style. "Will you marry me?" Caleb asked, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Before Amelia could answer, Lila jumped to her feet, clapping her hands and shouting, "Say yes, ma'am. Please say yes." Amelia laughed through her tears, nodding as she pulled Caleb to his feet. "Yes, Caleb. 1,000 times yes." Lila squealed with joy, throwing her arms around them both. "I'm going to have a family, Caleb. There is going to be my real dad." The three of them hugged tightly, their little family now officially coming together under the glow of the lights. The promise of love and excitement of a new beginning. Amelia Brooks had always prided herself on staying composed, but meeting Caleb's mother, Victoria Grant, tested her like nothing else. From the moment Amelia stepped into Victoria's grand estate, she felt the weight of disapproval. The mansion was as intimidating as its owner, gleaming floors, towering chandeliers, and an air of perfection that seemed designed to unsettle anyone who dared step inside. Victoria met her at the door with a handshake that was forceful but chilly, her keen stare raking across Amelia as if memorizing every fault. "So you're Amelia," she replied, her tone courteous but aloof. "Caleb has talked highly about you." Amelia faked a grin, squeezing Layla's hand for support. "It's great to meet you, Mrs. Grant. Caleb's told me so much about you." Victoria's gaze darted to Lila, who was carrying a little flower she had gathered earlier as a gesture of compassion. "And this must be your daughter," Victoria replied, her tone hardening ever so little. "Layla, is it?" Layla nodded, handing out the bouquet with a bright grin. "I chose these for you, Mrs. Grant." Victoria received the flowers with a slight grin, though her eyes lingered on Layla in a way that made Amelia's stomach knot. "How nice," she remarked, placing the flower on an adjacent table without a second glance. "Caleb's affection for kids is endearing." Amelia nibbled on her lip. Perceiving the implicit condemnation, the remainder of the evening transpired in a sequence of nuanced yet incisive statements. Victoria concealed her contempt beneath a facade of courteous inquiry as she inquired about Amelia's work as a bakery owner. "Don't you work from home? That gives you some freedom, I guess." As she went on, her gaze lingered on Amelia's modest clothing. Managing a company and raising a child alone must be challenging. Caleb has consistently worked very hard. Someone who can keep up is what he deserves. With every remark, Amelia's heart plummeted, but she remained calm, determined not to let Victoria see her wince. Victoria's disdain was evident despite Caleb's attempts to diffuse the atmosphere with casual chat. Amelia was emotionally spent by the time they departed. Caleb reached over and squeezed her hand in the vehicle. "I apologize," he replied quietly. "She is only defensive. She will change her mind." Though skepticism gnawed at her, Amelia forced a grin. Victoria wasn't only being protective when she expressed displeasure. It was intimate. Amelia sensed it beneath the surface of courteous smiles and truncated speech. Victoria wasn't only against her, she desired her departure. The initial encounter had established the framework for a conflict Amelia was unaware she was about to engage in. Victoria Grant started to get involved in every facet of Caleb and Amelia's wedding preparations as soon as they announced their engagement. What ought to have been a happy moment for Amelia swiftly devolved into a taxing endurance test. Victoria was always interfering. Every recommendation and choice she made was tinged with her disdain. It began quietly, with remarks passed off as constructive counsel. A modest wedding. Victoria raised a perfectly manicured eyebrow as she said, "It won't work when Amelia says she wants something personal. A party worthy of Caleb's status is in order." Before Amelia could answer, Victoria had already begun to enumerate ambitious projects that she believed would be more suitable, the most of which were much above Amelia's financial means or her own vision. Amelia made an effort to reach a compromise by proposing a location that struck a mix between intimacy and elegance. Victoria, however, wasn't content. When they visited the location, she said with a little smirk, "It's charming. However, don't you believe Caleb would look better in something a little more sophisticated?" There was more criticism to come. Amelia showed Victoria her ideal wedding gown, which was understated, classic, and sophisticated. Victoria's nose furrowed, as though she had been seen something that wasn't worthy. Her tone hardly concealed her contempt as she answered, "It's fine. However, Caleb's wife ought to dress more elegantly. After all, there will be many notable visitors at this wedding." For Caleb's sake, Amelia nodded courteously, even as her heart sunk. She allowed Victoria to influence her decision and ended up choosing a dress that was far more elaborate than she had originally intended. When she showed him the outfit, Caleb saw how disappointed she was and gave her a tight hug. "No matter what, you will look stunning," he comforted her. "Keep her from ruining this for us." Victoria's meddling intensified in spite of Caleb's encouragement. She took over of the guest list and started inviting people Amelia didn't even know, including friends and business associates. One evening, Victoria demanded that we include the Graysons, a prominent family in her social circle. "We're good friends, and it would be a bad impression if they weren't invited." Knowing that an argument would only worsen the situation, Amelia bit her tongue. However, Victoria's authority over the wedding's specifics wasn't the worst aspect. Her subtle, scathing comments were what undermined Amelia's self-assurance. "It's a shame you don't come from a more connected family," Victoria said casually at one planning meeting. "You may find it difficult to adapt because Caleb has always been a part of particular groups." Beneath the table, Amelia clenched her hands, resisting the need to strike back. She mustered a grin instead. "Caleb and I will figure things out on our own." Victoria's eyes did not meet her grin. "I hope so." Amelia put a lot of effort into keeping the peace for Caleb's sake, despite the emotional toll. She reminded herself that maintaining harmony was a necessary component of their future together, and that Victoria was his mother. However, Amelia secretly understood that nothing would ever be sufficient for Victoria, know of how much she gave up. The ceremony was no longer the only aspect of the wedding. The battleground was now quiet, and Amelia was struggling to maintain her joy. When Amelia and Caleb learned they were having their first child together, they were ecstatic. Several months of arranging their nuptials and establishing their relationship with Layla, finding out about the pregnancy seemed like the ideal next step. Amelia was apprehensive about Layla's reaction, but her worries were allayed by her daring daughter's enthusiasm. Amelia made the decision to break the news to Caleb one evening, while they were all having supper together in his comfortable cabin. She instructed Layla to open a little, wrapped box that she had placed in front of her. There was a small pair of baby shoes inside. Layla's gaze shifted from the shoes to her mother, and her eyes grew wide. "Does this imply that I will become an older sister?" Amelia gave a nod. Her eyes filled with tears of happiness. "Yes, dear. You will be the most amazing big sister ever." Layla threw her arms around Amelia and shouted with delight, "I am overjoyed. I will impart all of my knowledge to the infant." Caleb smiled, bringing Amelia into a cozy hug. With enthusiasm in his voice, he declared, "This is the best news. Our family is always expanding." Over the course of the following few days, Caleb was eager to tell his mother the news in the hopes that it might change her attitude toward Amelia, but Amelia was reluctant. Even in situations that ought to strengthen bonds, she had learned to anticipate Victoria's rejection. Caleb couldn't contain his joy when he contacted Victoria to tell her the news. "Amelia, Mom and I have some amazing news. You will become a grandma." When Victoria eventually spoke, there was a lengthy silence on the other end of the telephone. Her voice was abrasive. "A grandmother. Caleb, are you certain that this is good news? Have you given any thought to whether the child is indeed yours?" Amelia stood motionless, listening in on the talk, and Caleb's expression tightened. "How can you say that at all, Mom?" "The baby is mine, of course." But Victoria wasn't finished. "Caleb, you must consider your options. A pregnancy might be used as a trap by a lady like Amelia. You've always had too much faith." Amelia's eyes welled up with tears as Caleb stood up for her. "You're out of line, Mom. Amelia and I are creating a family together, and I adore her. You must stop." Victoria, however, continued. Caleb admitted to Amelia a few days later that his mother had gone too far. She engaged a private detective. His voice was angry as he said, "Amelia, she wants to learn more about your past. She believes you are concealing something." Amelia felt her heart sink. What is she hoping to discover? "I haven't done anything improper." "I am aware of that," Caleb replied, drawing her near. "I informed her of this as well. But you are aware of her nature. She wants to be in charge of everything." Amelia was always on edge because she knew someone was observing her. Because of Victoria's mistrust, she began to look over her shoulder every time she left the bakery, which made her nervous. Layla tried to lift her mother's spirits with her typical antics after noticing that she was uncomfortable, but there was no denying the stress. Victoria's harshness had marred the happiness of the baby news, even with Caleb's support. Amelia saw that Victoria wasn't only expressing disapproval. At all costs, she was committed to causing a rift between them. However, Amelia made the decision to defend her family, even if it meant confronting Victoria in a way she had never done before. There had been a false pleasantry in the invitation to dinner at Victoria Grant's mansion. "Let's attempt a new beginning," Victoria had said in a clipped fake voice. Ever optimistic, Caleb urged Amelia to agree. "Perhaps she's finally warming up," he said. Although she wasn't persuaded, Amelia consented for the sake of it. She felt in her heart that Victoria's offer was more about dominance than it was about making amends. Amelia spent hours smothering the developing pit in her stomach on the day of the meal. For Lila's sake, she chose a modest clothing and made an effort to relax. As always, Layla was her intelligent, upbeat self, thrilled about the magnificent home and eager to see if Caleb's mother would finally show interest in them. With a smile, she responded, "Don't worry, Mom. You are the greatest." As usual, there was a sense of fear about the home when they entered. There was a noticeable tension. With her customary air of civility, Victoria greeted them, her gaze sweeping over Amelia and Layla with hardly concealed disapproval. The elegant dining room, with its long table set with crystal glasses and beautiful china, was the venue for the dinner service. However, the sophisticated environment was unable to conceal Victoria's cold attitude. Victoria's scathing remarks interrupted the conversation throughout the lunch, so she added, "Amelia," in a suave but condescending tone, How is your small bakery doing? Juggling it with having a child must be a real struggle. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she stopped. Especially with your pregnancy currently, I sincerely hope that Caleb isn't taking on too much of the workload. Amelia clutched her fork and faked a grin, her knuckles white. The bakery is doing nicely. Thank you. Additionally, Caleb and I work well together. Victoria's mouth formed a little contemptuous smirk. That's one perspective, I guess. Despite Caleb's efforts to divert, Victoria's remarks only became more scathing as the evening went on. Amelia excused herself to the bathroom since she could feel her tolerance ebbing by the time dessert was brought. As she stood at the top of the large staircase, gazing down at the opulent decor below, she heard footsteps behind her, which she welcomed as an opportunity to take a breath and gather herself. Victoria's voice was piercing and icy. My son will never be satisfied with you. Amelia's heart was racing as she slowly turned. Mrs. Grant, I'm not attempting to prove anything to you. I'm in love with Caleb, and we're starting a family, regardless of your opinion. Victoria took a step forward, her gaze piercing. All you are is a burden. I will not allow you to destroy his life. Victoria moved forward with her hand outstretched before Amelia could react. It was an unexpected but purposeful thrust. Amelia also lost her footing. She fell down the steps, her body thudding sickeningly with every step, and the world twisted. Lila's frightened cry was the last sound she heard before everything went dark. Mom! The dull, throbbing agony that shot through Amelia's body was the first thing she felt. Her senses were overwhelmed by the hospital's antiseptic odor, and she was halted as she attempted to walk by a harsh ECG. Her eyes opened slowly, and the hazy objects around her started to take shape. With his head in his hands, Caleb sat by her bed. His typically composed expression was altered by obvious concern. Caleb. Amelia's voice was weak and harsh as she croaked. As he reached for her hand, his head flew up, and a look of relief crossed his face. Softly, his voice quivering, he murmured, You're awake. I'm grateful. Amelia blinked, trying to make sense of what had transpired. Then she realized. The stairs, the supper, Victoria's icy remarks. A wave of panic swept across her chest. The infant. Her free hand automatically went to her stomach as she spoke. Is the infant doing well? Caleb's eyes gleamed with unshed tears as he firmly clasped her hand. He is present. Amelia, our son is secure. He is well, but they had to have an emergency C-section. Tears ran down her cheeks as relief washed over her. I must see him. After Caleb hit the nurse's call button, a nurse wheeled in a tiny bassinet in a matter of seconds. She gently swaddled a little infant in Amelia's arms. As her newborn son's little fingers curled around her bosom, Amelia glanced down at him. Despite the stress and anguish, love overcame her because he was wonderful. We gave him the name Noah. Caleb spoke quietly. I assumed you would enjoy that. Cradling their kid, Amelia nodded, speechless. However, the moment's tranquility was fleeting as her thoughts wandered back to the fall. Caleb. Her voice was shaking as she started. Mommy? She gave me a shove. Anger flashed in his eyes and his jaw tensed. I am aware. He spoke aggressively. Layla witnessed everything. She informed me. I've already had a conversation with the cops. Amelia's kid had seen such a horrific event, and her heart hurt for her. Diana, too. Her question was hardly audible above a whisper. Caleb responded, She's been arrested. She is accused of attempting to kill someone. A range of feelings, including grief, vindication, and a persistent sense of betrayal, were evoked by hearing those remarks. Amelia said to Noah, She could have killed me. Our son could have been killed by her. She won't harm us once again. Caleb's voice was steady as he promised. Layla, Noah, and you. I now consider you family. That's the only important thing. Emotions ran high during the trial. Amelia's fortitude and resolve are put to the test. Previously an untouchable lady, Diana Grant now occupied the defendant's chair. Her calm appearance revealed none of the chaos beneath the crowded courtroom. Both reporters and onlookers were keen to see a powerful socialite fall from grace. Amelia sat there and observed. Her soul remains strong, but her body continues to recover. Caleb sat next to her, silently supporting her with his hand in hers. Lila was close by, courageously getting ready to testify. Knowing how brave it would be to talk about that awful night, Amelia's heart hurt for her daughter. Diana was clearly the target of the prosecution's case. They described her history of domineering conduct, her obvious animosity against Amelia. Her behavior during the family supper is the most damning of all. The pivotal moment was Layla's testimony. Taking a position for solace, Lila held onto a little plush animal that Caleb had given her. As she described what she had witnessed, her voice remained calm despite her nervousness. My mom was advised by Grandma Diana that she wasn't suitable for Caleb. With her tiny hands clutching the edge of the witness stand, Lila said. She then gave her a shove. She didn't trip. She fell because of Grandma. A silence descended across the courtroom as Lila's comments lingered. Amelia's eyes filled with tears. The sorrow of knowing her daughter had to relive that moment was mixed with pride. The fall was an accident, according to the defense. However, Lila's thorough description and further proof left little space for skepticism. Throughout the trial, Diana maintained her icy, unrepentant manner. She didn't even glance at Lila or Amelia. She concentrated only on keeping her remaining semblance of composure. However, her mask broke as the jury returned its judgment. The defendant, Diana Grant, is found guilty of attempted murder by the jury. The foreperson made an announcement. The courtroom erupted in gasps when the judge handed down Diana's punishment. For the first 10 years in jail, without the chance of release. A rush of relief passed over Amelia. For Caleb, who had lost his mother in the process, it was tinged with melancholy. Reporters demanded remarks from the courtroom. Amelia, however, spoke simply. What any mother would do, I did. I kept my family safe. As they walked out of the courtroom, Amelia carried baby Noah in Caleb's arms while holding Lila's hand securely. More significantly, they had come out stronger as a family, even though justice had been done. In the weeks after the trial, there was a mixture of careful reconstruction and silent relief. Despite being a source of calm, Diana's disappearance left traces of what had happened. However, Amelia was adamant that their future would not be shaped by the suffering of the past. She concentrated on the things that really important with Caleb, Lila, and infant Noah, their household. Noah soon became the focal point of their universe. Even the most difficult times were made lighter by his adorable coos and little grins. Lila enthusiastically took on the role of big sister. She would sit next to his bassinet and make funny expressions or sing lullabies to get him to laugh. I believe I'm his favorite, Mom. With pride, she would exclaim, her laughter contagious. Noah achieved a milestone one bright afternoon that united the entire family. He staggered around the living room on wobbly legs. He extended his little hands to Caleb. Hurry up, friend. Caleb knelt down and held out his arms, encouraging. Lila enthusiastically clapped her hands and shuffled resolutely to encourage him. As Noah took his first steps, he immediately landed in Caleb's arms. I knew he could do it, Lila said, as the audience erupted in applause. With tears in her eyes, Amelia watched the spectacle, thankful for the pleasure and love that now surrounded them. She was reminded at these moments of how far they had come from the shadows of dread and treachery. They had become a tighter, more powerful family. Once the children were sleeping, evenings were their favorite time of day. Caleb and Amelia would enjoy the refreshing Seattle air while sitting on the porch of his old cabin. They would share their aspirations, future ambitions, and appreciation for one another. One night, Caleb exclaimed in an emotional voice, "You've made us a family. Without you, I'm not sure what I'd do." Amelia put her head on his shoulder and grinned. "We've all strengthened each other," she said, "and we will continue to construct this life together, no matter what." Their hearts changed with the seasons. They weren't only recovering, they were doing well, discovering happiness in the little things that make life so wonderful. They felt they could overcome anything together. Amelia couldn't help but think about how far they had come as she sat by their comfortable cabin's window and watched the rain gently tap on the glass. She had never been tested as she had been during the past year. Fear, treachery, and grief had threatened to shatter her. Despite everything, She had discovered a power she was unaware she possessed. She was anchored by her family. She had gotten through the worst of times thanks to Layla's laughing, Noah's naive awe, and Caleb's unfailing devotion. Even though they were flawed and had wounds from the past, they offered a tale of love, progress, and resiliency. Hearing Lila laugh from the other room made Amelia smile, and probably made Noah chuckle as well. She had a startling realization at that same time. Their family was characterized by the unbreakable relationship they had formed together, not by the hardships they had faced. They couldn't be stopped. They were home together. Story 3. I'm Emma Collins, and I'm 25 years old. I recently received my fine arts degree from the University of California. There are difficulties in life as a recent graduate, but my narrative is about more than just adjusting to adulthood. It's about treachery, a family history, and persevering through hardship. My mother, Olivia Collins, was the center of my world as a child, an entrepreneur and a gifted cook. She was a careful planner, in addition to being an amazing chef. She made sure I always had a safety net by intentionally designing her life. Even prior to her being diagnosed with cancer, she had guaranteed both her and my future. She put her heart and energy into building the family bakery from the ground up, and it was one of her most treasured things. She left the company to me when she died 4 years ago, so I would have something to cling to, something that would always be a part of her, Emma. This bakery is not only a company, it's our origins, our home, she would explain. There will always be a place you can call home. She fought cancer, but she never wavered in her commitment to getting me ready for life without her. She ensured that I comprehended every aspect of the company, from handling suppliers to managing employees. Her act of love was her insight, and I live with it every day. But life wasn't always easy. Before it all broke apart, my parents' marriage lasted 10 years. My father, Jack Collins, left us for someone else when I was a little child. There were just silent farewells, no theatrical altercations or courtroom skirmishes. He swiftly moved on, married Madison, a younger lady who seemed to naturally assume the roles of mother and wife. Soon after, their daughter Abigail was born. And even though I periodically went to see them, I never felt like I fit in with their new family. A son was not usually courteous but aloof, the type of stepmother who treated you more like an outsider than a member of the family. "Do you want to remain for supper, Emma?" she would inquire in a tone that said she hoped I wouldn't. In the meantime, Dad put in a lot of overtime, saying he had to support his family, a category that frequently appeared to leave me out. Abigail. They adored my half-sister, who was 10 years younger. I had witnessed Madison fawning over her, plaiting her hair, or congratulating her on each small achievement. It was difficult to avoid feeling alienated. In spite of everything, my father and I continued to have a friendly but aloof relationship. Maybe out of obligation or remorse, he gave a flat sum to cover my college tuition. It was his method of remaining active without physically being there. Since I believed it to be the most I could expect for at the moment, I accepted it without question. I had no idea that my father's ulterior intentions and my mother's careful preparations would pave the way for a catastrophe I never anticipated. The most difficult thing I have ever experienced was losing my mother. Beyond my mother, Olivia Collins was more. She gave me the confidence to go on the world and served as my cheerleader and anchor. My life fell apart 4 years ago when she died of cancer, a few weeks before I was set to depart for college. The sadness was too much to bear. A part of me seemed to be gone. I also had a hard time getting out of bed for a while. I felt numb during those initial weeks, hardly able to comprehend her absence. My father, Jack Collins, intervened at that point and provided assistance in a manner I hadn't anticipated. To help me, he, Madison, and Abigail temporarily moved into the house. I didn't examine it at the time since I was too overcome by my loss. I simply felt thankful that folks were there. Even though there had always been tension in our relationship, "Emma, we're here to support you." With a reassuring touch on my shoulder, my father remarked. Madison gave a nod of assent. Her expression was deliberately set up to appear empathetic. Despite her inquisitive gaze exploring the house like if it were a museum, my half-sister Abigail seemed to go out of her way to be kind. Their presence first provided some respite. Dad assisted with the burdensome paperwork that comes with losing a loved one, while Madison took responsibility of dinner planning and household chores. As a little diversion from the overwhelming weight of my sadness, Abigail would sit with me and talk about school and her friends. It was weird, yet somewhat consoling at the time. As summer came to an end and the day I started college drew near, I had to make a tough choice about the house. It seemed unimaginable to sell it. It was the heritage of my mother, the location she had fought so hard to get us. However, it also didn't seem like a good idea to leave it unoccupied for 4 years. Dad approached me with a suggestion at that point. One morning over coffee, he remarked, "Emma, while you're in school, how about we stay here? You won't have to worry about anything since we'll take care of the home and pay all the expenses," Madison said as she was at the stove, cooking pancakes. "Everyone would benefit from it. At that time, the home will be in excellent hands, and Abigail adores this school. It seems to be a sensible fix." I concurred. Feeling thankful for the opportunity, I departed for college, knowing that my mother's home and memories will be preserved. Classes, homework, and late-night study sessions were all part of the hectic college experience. However, returning home during breaks was always like entering a new planet. A reassuring reminder of home was provided by my visits. And gradually, I became aware of something surprising. At my mother's house, the dynamics of the family were shifting. Madison welcomed me home for my first break with a homemade lunch and a kind grin. "Emma, welcome back. I prepared your favorite dish, lasagna." As though she had always been aware of my tastes, she remarked, arranging the table. My half-sister Abigail was eager to show me her most recent artwork and dragged me to her room. "Is it your opinion that I should put additional blue here, Emma?" For the first time, she would question, "Is your enthusiasm infectious?" Instead of treating me like the distant relative who came to visit sometimes, she treated me like a sister. These trips evolved into more than just a way to refuel as the years went by. They began to believe that I was a part of something greater. We would playfully argue over decorations while decorating the tree together over Christmas vacations. Madison would say, "Tinsel is so tacky," but I would chuckle and claim it was timeless. Dad would smile as though this was the family he had always dreamed of, lifting Abigail to put the star on top. We nearly felt like a real family during those warm, sincere times. Summer vacations were much more leisurely and longer. On idle afternoons, Abigail and I would eat popcorn and binge-watch movies in the neighborhood pool. I was taken aback when Madison invited me to join her book club, where we would discuss romance books and chuckle at their plot twists. Emma's observations are accurate. One evening, Madison informed her friends, which surprised me by making me feel included. Even Dad appeared to retreat from his customary reticent manner. He would come to supper with us and inquire about my lessons, really curious about my life. One evening, his voice full of emotion, he stated, "Your mother would be very proud of you." Moments like this gave me the impression that I was more than simply a guest. I belonged to the family. As time went on, my perception of Madison and Abigail changed. Initially appearing aloof and uncaring, Madison eventually took on a mother demeanor, always inquiring about my life and ensuring that I was comfortable. The home was alive with Abigail's young enthusiasm and incessant conversation, and I felt like an elder sister to her, since she was often asking for my opinion. For the first time, with every visit, the second house appeared to transform. There were hints of Madison's influence, a fresh pair of drapes and a thoughtfully placed dining table centerpiece. They were, nevertheless, tasteful, merging with the coziness my mother had fostered. We all seemed to be working together to create something that respected the past while embracing the present. By the time I graduated, I honestly thought we had established an odd but useful family dynamic. Although it wasn't flawless, it was effective. I had no idea how brittle everything was, or how easily the foundation we had established could give way under the pressure of unspoken realities. I felt as though a new chapter in my life had begun when I graduated from college. I eventually received my degree after 4 years of arduous effort, late-night study sessions, and future-focused dreams. I had secured employment at a nearby company in my hometown, and the prospect of going back to my mother's house, where I had grown up, made me feel both excited and at ease. My home, where I could finally start a job and settle down, was waiting for me. It was a sunny and beautiful June afternoon when I got home. It's the type of day that gives you hope. The cab arrived at the driveway. The sight of the house brought a smile to my face. The garden seems to be kept up nicely. However, the roses my mother had planted appeared to be a little different from the way she cared for them. Despite the minor adjustments Madison had made over the years, the house felt the same. The shutters were painted a new color, and the curtains were replaced. Everything appeared friendly, and I was eager to enter and reclaim my room. I grabbed my keys and dragged my bags up the front walk. I was eager to enter the house that had always served as a refuge for me. However, the lock refused to turn when I inserted the key. I scowled and gave it another go, shifting the keys a little. "Nothing has changed," I whispered to me, confused. "What on earth?" And gave the door a loud knock. It must have been an error. Without anybody considering to provide me a replacement key, a new lock was fitted. A second later, Madison was standing there when the door opened. In an instant, her look changed from one of amazement to one of discomfort. As though she had been baking, she had on an apron that was covered in flour. "Emma." Her voice was tentative as she said, "Why are you here?" I rolled my bag inside the doorway, disregarding the unease in her voice. "What are you saying?" "This is where I reside," I responded, looking around the living room, which had a little different appearance than when I had left it. A new carpeting and new furniture configurations. Before Madison could respond, why were the locks changed? From the living room came Dad. He moved stiffly, his face pallid. Abigail followed him, silent but with a frightened expression. "Emma?" Dad was clearly uncomfortable because he started massaging the back of his neck. "Let's have a little conversation at the workplace." As I followed him to the little office that had formerly belonged to my mother, my mind began to race with concerns. Her books and awards still adorned the walls, but the air seemed thick, as though the place itself knew what was about to happen. Dad turned to me, his hands trembling a little, and shut the door behind us. "Emma?" His voice was low as he began. "I have something to share with you." I could sense the pressure of his words weighing down on him as he hesitated. "Madison?" "Madison believes that I own this house." I gazed at him. Uncompress the heading. "What are you discussing?" "I inherited this house from Mom. She wills it." He avoided looking at me as he nodded. "I am aware of that. But I told Madison it was mine when we moved here. That I had given it to your mother as a gesture of goodwill following the divorce, and that it had returned to me after her death. The treachery was like a kick to the stomach. You spent 4 years lying to her. You're telling me that she doesn't even realize this is my house after you gave her the impression that it was yours?" Dad drooped his shoulders. "It didn't seem to matter to me. We needed a place to stay while you were in college. I assumed it would be short-term." I felt a wave of anger and incredulity. "Short-term? Dad, this is my home, Mom's home, and you've been residing here, are you telling me? Letting Madison pretend that it belongs to her? While you deceived both me and her." Weakly he added, "I was going to tell her the truth, but his words seemed empty. Please allow me a little time to think things out." I gave a head shake, enraged. "Dad, you've had 4 years already." Madison knocked on the door at that very time. She spoke sharply. "Is everything in there all right?" One thing was evident despite the oppressive atmosphere. I refused to allow them to carry on with this sham. Although the first few days back at home were uncomfortable, I made an effort to tell myself that things will improve. Following the altercation with my dad, I decided to remain silent for the moment. I was hoping that he would fulfill his pledge to settle the matter. However, the mood in the house changed almost instantly, and Madison's actions rapidly deteriorated. Little things were the first. Remarks that were filled with subtle barbs, yet first seemed courteous. "Emma." To be more efficient, I rearranged the pantry. "Since you've been so preoccupied with education, you most likely didn't notice." "Smiling too sweetly," she would say. And then there were mishaps. My favorite blouse was destroyed by vivid pink stains, and I discovered it in the laundry one morning. Oh no. When I approached Madison, she yelled out. She spoke in a mockingly worried tone. "The washing baskets must have been messed up by me." When a residence becomes overly crowded, several problems occur. Once eager to spend time with me, Abigail now appeared aloof and distant. When I walked in the door, she rolled her eyes, and she began calling me that chick when she talked loudly on the phone with her pals. Once sharing secrets and showcasing her artwork, the younger sister now regarded me like an unwanted visitor. "It's strange that you're still here," Mom remarks. One evening, I heard her whisper, and the word hurt more than I thought it would. Madison's job of being passive-aggressive quickly escalated into open animosity. She cornered me in the kitchen one evening, as I was pouring myself a cup of coffee. She had her arms crossed and her face was cold. "Have you considered obtaining a place of your own, Emma?" Her question was sharp, yet her tone was informal. "You're about to start a new job. It's time to consider living on your own. After all, you're an adult lady." I gripped the cup tightly, trying to maintain my composure. "In fact, I've discussed staying here for a bit with Dad. He doesn't mind." I briefly believed she may dispute as her lips formed a narrow line. Rather, without saying another word, she turned and walked out of the kitchen. Her deeds, however, speak louder than words ever could. The living room had been reconfigured when I woke up the next morning. My mom's favorite vase was relocated to a shelf in a dusty corner. It was not in keeping with the new style. Madison spoke those words. My anger increased when I faced her, but I made an effort to remain silent since I knew that arguing with her would only make the situation worse. The household tension was intolerable. Abigail treated me with contempt when Madison made it apparent that I wasn't welcome. Even my father, who had always been my rock, was aloof. He frequently left the home early in the morning, claiming to have business commitments, and he avoided making eye contact. I began to feel alienated in my own house. Uncomfortable silences and subtle jabs turned family dinners into a battleground. Madison would prepare enough food to feed 3 people, then pretend to be shocked when I sat down at the table with them. She would remark, "Oh, I didn't think you'd be here for dinner." Her eyes were cold, yet her tone was light. Dad would sit silently and avoid any conflict, while Abigail would chuckle at her mother's comments. I started to feel lonely as the days went by. I noticed that I was withdrawing to my room more frequently. I steered clear of the animosity that seemed to follow me throughout the home. However, I was unable to shake the oppressive feeling of betrayal even there. Madison was no longer the only issue here. It was about my dad, the guy who had watched in silence while his wife eroded my sense of myself. I made an effort to divert my attention by concentrating on my new career and getting back in touch with old pals. However, the burden of domestic stress persisted. Our delicate family dynamic was becoming more and more strained every day, and I couldn't get rid of the sensation that I was being forced out of my own life. The start of Saturday morning was abnormally quiet. There were no sounds coming from Madison's baking throughout the weekend. There was no loud music coming from Abigail's room, and there were no faint TV sounds where Dad typically watches sports. The home itself seemed to be holding its breath in the strange hush. I said, "Hello, Madison, Dad," as I padded downstairs after sneaking out of bed. However, no answer was received. Not only was the kitchen immaculate, but it had been used since the previous evening. The living area appeared undisturbed, with the couch's throw cushions placed flawlessly. Even the typical mess at the door, Abigail's footwear, Madison had lost her purse. A quick look out verified it. There was no automobile in the driveway for Dad. I looked at my phone, anticipating a text or note announcing their disappearance. However, nothing was present. Perplexed, I called my father. It immediately went to voicemail. I scowled and made a couple more attempts before grudgingly phoning Madison. The 4th ring was heard by her. Her tone was angry and aggressive. "Emma, what do you want?" She lost her temper. In the background, there was the faint sound of waves and tropical music. "I just wanted to know everyone's whereabouts," I responded, taken aback by her tone. The home was deserted when I woke up. She chuckled, but not in a kind manner. "The cutting was nasty. We told you we were in the Maldives, didn't we? Flights in first class. Opulent resort. The process." There was mockery in her voice. "To be honest, we didn't bring it up since we didn't want you to follow along and demand payment from us." "What?" I stumbled, fury and astonishment mingling. "What are you talking about, Madison?" You walked away, silently. Save it, she said icily. This whole thing is over for me. Living in our home and taking advantage of us as though you own it, you are nothing more than a freeloader. I won't put up with that, but your father may. How awkward is it for a mature lady to be squatting in her own house? She wasn't done yet, but her words were like a smack. I want you gone by the time we return. Emma, get your belongings and go. Additionally, don't believe that you can use guilt to get your father to let you remain. He concurs with me. He simply lacks the courage to tell you himself. Your number has already been banned. Enjoy your life. Before I could reply, the line died. I just stood there for a while, the phone shaking in my grasp. The weight of the treachery struck me like a tidal wave as her hateful words replayed in my head. Then, though something changed within me, anger replaced the grief and incredulity. Anger that is concentrated and white-hot. I lived here, the home of my mother. I had finished being pleasant. I packed their things for the remainder of the day with a resolve I was unaware I possessed. Dad's golf equipment, Abigail's school materials, and Madison's pricey clothing. Everything was packed into bags and boxes. I made sure there was no sign of them left in the house by carefully stacking them in the garage. With everything I put away, I felt as though I was recovering a piece of myself, and every movement was therapeutic. I had contacted a locksmith by the evening. Could you please change the locks right away? I asked in a forceful voice. Within an hour, he was there, changing all the locks in the home while I watched, holding on to the new keys like a lifeline. I didn't care that it cost a little fortune. I had a weird feeling of relief as I shut the door behind him. Once more, this was my home, and nobody was going to take it away. After a hard day at work on Friday, I saw their car as soon as I came into the driveway. They had returned. With their boxes and bags from the garage around them, Madison, Dodd, and Abigail stood close to the front steps. Madison's hands were making frantic gestures as she shouted to her father, her face flushed with rage. Dodd wore his typical expression of silent discomfiture, and Abigail hung back, frowning. Madison's voice burst as soon as I got out of my automobile. "You have no right to replace the locks," she yelled and came charging at me. "This is our home. Locking us out is not your right." I walked quietly past them and approached the front door, ignoring her tirade. There was no sign in sight. With each stride, her voice became louder. "It's breaking and entering. We're going to call the cops. Do you really believe you can ignore us and just chuck us out?" At the door, I paused and turned to look at her. Even though her comments were poisonous, I felt solid and at ease within. "No, Madison," I firmly responded. "It's not your home. It wasn't. I own this house. My mother left everything up to her will and me. You've only been residing here because I gave me permission. I'm finished now." She screwed her face in shock. She looked at her father, who was motionless by the car. "Tell her she's lying, Jack. Let her know that this is our home." Her voice was harsh as she demanded. It was as though Dad wanted to dissolve into the sidewalk. He squirmed uneasily, avoiding my eyes, and then said, "She is being honest." Madison became enraged. "You misled me." Glaring at him, she let out a yell. "By allowing her to remain, you gave me the impression that this was your home and that you were being helpful to us. Have you not told me anything else?" She returned her focus to me. Anger and despair were mixed together in her expression. With a sudden calm, pleasant tone, she said, "Emma, sweetheart, here, we've had a lot of fun. Thanksgiving feasts, book club evenings. This house belongs to a family. We can definitely figure something out." "No," I interrupted her. "We are unable to. The garage contains your belongings. Take them and go." Madison's tone became nasty once again as her mask cracked. "You're a little ungrateful. This is how you pay us back for everything we've done for you. You would leave your own family homeless. I've never been treated like family by you." With a calm yet powerful voice, I shot back. "Additionally, don't act as though allegiance is at issue. Madison, you attempted to take my house, the home of my mother." At last, Dad came forward. His voice wavered. "Please, Emma, we are family, even if I am aware of my errors. We can solve this. Let's remain a bit longer, please." I gave a headshake. Steele met his beseeching gaze. "No, father. You told her a falsehood. You also misled me. As you watched and remained silent, you allowed her to remove any traces of your mother from this house. I will not let you to continue doing this." Madison made one final attempt. She spoke in a desperate tone. "This is not possible. Emma, we'll fight you on this." I turned to look at them one more time before opening the door and entering. "Feel free to give it a try," I remarked simply as I firmly closed the door through the window behind me. As they packed the last of their things into the car, I saw them quarrel. Madison let out a scream. As the vehicle drove away, Abigail sobbed and Dad simply looked defeated. Something heavy came off my chest. Once more, the home was mine. Mine, really. The home was frighteningly silent in the days after they left, yet the quietness also offered a surprisingly peaceful feeling. I wasn't being cautious or anticipating Madison's passive-aggressive comments for the first time in years. Once more, the area was mine. It also brought a clarity I hadn't experienced in a while. My mother's house was no longer the only one here. It served as my haven. It wasn't easy, but it was vital for me to break off my relationship with my father and his family in order to start again. Dodd made many attempts to get in touch, phoning from different numbers and leaving voicemails containing several excuses and pledges to make up for things I didn't answer. After what he had permitted to occur, his comments sounded hollow. In one message he wrote, "I love you, Emma." I was only attempting to maintain harmony. However, peace based on deception isn't really peace. Furthermore, I was no longer prepared to sacrifice my honor for his convenience. Madison made no attempt to get in touch with me. She had expressed her emotions clearly. Abigail's quiet hurt more than I had anticipated, but I had to remind myself that she was still a young child and was affected by her parents' choices. Nevertheless, I was aware that it was best to break free from the poisonous relationships that had been a burden on me for so long. Now that they were gone, I focused on starting again. Reclaiming the house, both literally and emotionally, was the first step. I repainted the walls, put the furniture back in my mother's order, and used warm, cozy colors that brought back memories of her. I used the same hues she had adored when I replanted the rose plants in the backyard. Making the place my own work became another anchor for me, and every little adjustment seemed like a step toward paying tribute to her memory. Although difficult, my work at Marshall and Brooks Financial was rewarding, and I gave it my all, throwing myself into it. For the first time, I felt like I belonged to a community, and my coworkers became friends. Harper, a member of the risk assessment team, became a close friend, and we laughed and discussed future plans over our lunch breaks. Restoring my mother's bakery, which had been shut down since her death, was the most significant undertaking, though. The doors finally reopened after months of preparation and late nights. I was overcome with pride and a sense of belonging the first time I walked behind the counter, the aroma of freshly baked bread and pastries filling the air. The bakery was her legacy, not simply a company, and now it was up to me to continue in the silence. I frequently reflected on all that had occurred, including the treachery, heartache, and deaths. I had made a family call once. However, I didn't think about it with resentment. Rather, I viewed it as a phase in my life that taught me the value of setting limits, respecting oneself, and the strength of beginning over. Healing is difficult and not linear, but I felt something I hadn't felt in years as I stood in my mother's home, surrounded by the life I was creating. I immediately saw why my mother had always advocated for future preparation. Even when the people I trusted most failed me, she had equipped me with the skills I needed to stand on my own. I knew I was ready to go when I noticed the roses blooming in the dusk light as I gazed out into the yard. This life, this home, I owned it, and I would transform it into something lovely for her, myself, and the future. She constantly wished for me to own,